My parents manipulated me for years, but when they tried to take my home and force me back into the camper, I made them face the consequences. I'm Aaron, 35, male. I used to think I was just unlucky in the family lottery. Turns out I was drafted into a cult of cruelty disguised as Lakin blood. My parents, Ruth and Leonard, raised 2 sons, me and their precious golden boy, Henri, 31. And I swear to God, I've spent most of my life being the villain in whatever story they decided to tell that week. Growing up, it was never subtle. Henri got everything shiny, the new bike, the bigger room, the better excuses. If I came home with an A, they'd ask why it wasn't an A+. Henri brought home a D, and somehow it was the teacher's fault. He's just more creative than you, Mom would say. Like failing algebra was an artistic choice. I left home at 18 with a duffel bag and a chipped tooth from when Dad accidentally hit me during one of his rants about respect. I slept in my car for 2 weeks, working day labor at construction sites until I found a mechanic shop that took pity on me. That's where I learned how to fix engines, grease under my nails, burnt coffee on my breath, and peace for the first time in years. It wasn't glamorous, but it was mine. Meanwhile, Henri was off in college, majoring in communications and minoring in mooching. My parents paid for everything: rent, car, credit cards. I didn't even get a phone call on my birthdays most years, but they sent Henri on cruises to help him relax after finals. I still remember my mom's voice once when I called for help after my old car broke down in the rain. We can't keep rescuing you from your own bad choices. Right, because being poor and alone was a choice I'd personally ordered from a catalog. Fast forward through a decade of scraping and surviving, sleeping in my truck some nights, when rent jumped too high, eating dollar store noodles, hustling through burnout. But 3 years ago, I got lucky. Landed a stable job at a welding company that actually treated people like humans. I saved every dime, lived lean, and last year, I bought my first home. A little fixer-upper outside of town, beat-up siding, squeaky floors, and a backyard full of wild grass. But it was mine. Every inch of it, paid for, with my hands, not my parents' pity. The first night I slept there, I cried. Not big sobs, just quiet, exhausted tears. For the first time in 35 years, I wasn't somebody's burden. I was free. Then, 2 months later, the knock came. It was a Sunday morning. I was fixing the kitchen window when my mom, Dad, and Henri showed up in my driveway like the past 15 years hadn't happened. They were all smiles, the kind that hides teeth. "We wanted to see your new house," Mom said, like she hadn't ignored my existence for a decade. Something in me went cold right then, because I knew that tone. It wasn't love, it was calculation. And I was right. They walked right past me like they still owned the place. Henri brushed my shoulder as he stepped inside, whistling low like he was touring a model home. "Wow, Aaron. Didn't think you had it in you," he said, dragging his hand along the wall. "Kinda small though, huh?" My jaw tightened. "It's enough for me," I said, still standing in the doorway, because none of them had been invited in. Mom looked around with that polite disgust she reserves for anything she can't control. "Well, it's cozy," she said. Then to Dad, "At least it's not another one of his shacks." Dad grunted, hands on his hips. Guess hard work pays off sometimes. For a minute, I thought maybe they just wanted to see the place. But I should have known better. The niceties were just the appetizer. Henri leaned against the counter, fake smile plastered on his face. "So, funny story. Our landlord's being a total jerk. Raised rent again. And with the kids, it's getting impossible." There it was, the setup. Mom jumped right in like it was rehearsed. "We were just thinking, Aaron, maybe you could help out. You got all this space." I blinked. "What space?" "Here," she said, waving her hand around like she was unveiling a prize. "You could live in your camper for a while. Let Henri and the kids stay in the house until they get back on their feet." I actually laughed at first. I thought it was a joke. Then I realized no one else was laughing. "You're serious?" I said slowly. Henri had the audacity to look offended. "Come on, man. You've got a camper. You're always saying you like your solitude anyway. It's not like we'd be here forever." "Henri," I said, stepping closer. "I worked for 15 years for this. Slept in my car. Ate cold beans out of a can. You think I'm going to hand over the one thing I finally have?" He raised his hands. "Wow, chill, I'm just asking. You don't have to be dramatic." Mom sighed. That long martyr sigh that used to make me feel like the villain as a kid. "Aaron, you've always been so selfish. Family helps family." "You mean I help family?" I snapped. "You've never lifted a damn finger for me." That broke her act. Her face twisted like I'd just spat on the floor. "Watch your tone. We're your parents." "Yeah," I said quietly. "You were supposed to be." For a second, nobody moved. Then Dad slammed his hand on the counter, hard enough to rattle a mug. "You don't talk to your mother like that in her presence." "She's in my house," I said, staring him down. That's when Henri decided to play the victim. "You've always been like this, bitter. You can't stand to see anyone else doing better." I laughed. "Better? You're begging me for a roof." He stepped forward, red-faced, veins popping in his neck. "You're pathetic, Aaron. You think a house makes you someone? You're still the same loser." I didn't move. "Maybe, but it's my house, loser. Or not. You step 1 inch closer, and you'll be yelling that from the sidewalk." The silence that followed was thick enough to choke on. Finally, Mom said, "You're going to regret this." I already did, I said, and opened the door wide. Out. They left without another word, Henri muttering curses as he stormed down the walkway. I watched them go, the sun catching the dented chrome of their SUV as it pulled away. When the street went quiet again, I stood there for a long time, just staring at the tire tracks in my gravel. My hands were still shaking. Not from fear, from something sharper. For the first time in my life, I hadn't folded. But I had a bad feeling that wasn't the end of it. For about a week after that showdown, it was blissfully quiet. No calls, no texts, no guilt-tripping voicemails. I started to think maybe, just maybe, they'd gotten the message. Then the messages began. The first one came from Mom. "We didn't deserve that, Aaron. You've always been cruel when you're hurt. Don't punish the kids for our mistakes." The kids. I knew what that meant. Henri was dragging his children into this. Then came one from Henri himself. "Bro, look, we just need a place for a few weeks. The landlord kicked us out. You're really gonna let your nieces sleep in a motel?" I didn't respond. 2 hours later, Dad texted me. "Family doesn't turn its back. You're proving what we always said. You only care about yourself." I sat on my porch that night, reading those words over and over until they blurred. For years, they'd called me selfish, ungrateful, difficult, and I'd believed it. Every damn time. That night, though, I realized it was their favorite weapon. Make me feel like the monster so they never had to face what they'd done. But the quiet didn't last. The next morning, I woke up to the sound of gravel crunching outside. I looked down through the blinds, and there it was. Henri's rusty SUV parked at the end of my driveway. He was unloading boxes. Actual boxes. I stepped outside in my work boots and hoodie, trying to keep my voice steady. "What the hell are you doing?" He didn't even look embarrassed. "You weren't answering. We had nowhere to go. I'll just park the camper in the yard. You can stay in the house." "No," I cut him off. "You're not moving in here." Henri looked back at me like I was insane. "Aaron, the kids are in the car. You're really going to do this to them?" I looked over. His daughter, Emma, maybe 9, was staring out the window, hugging a stuffed animal. His son, Leo, looked half asleep. My stomach twisted. They weren't the problem. Henri was. "Henri, you don't get to manipulate me with your kids," I said quietly. "You should have thought about them before you blew through every chance you had." He slammed a box down so hard I thought something shattered inside. "You always think you're so much better. You're not. You're just alone." "Better alone than used," I said. That's when he lost it. He marched up my steps, chest puffed out, eyes blazing. "You think this little house makes you a man? You've been jealous since we were kids. Mom and Dad saw through you then, and they see through you now." I didn't back up. Get off my porch." He sneered, took one more step, and before I could react, he shoved the front door open and started dragging boxes inside. I grabbed his arm, hard. "I said out." Henri jerked away. "Fine, you'll regret this. You've got no one, Aaron. No one." He stormed back to the car, slammed the door so hard the whole thing shook, and peeled out of the driveway, spitting rocks across my yard. I stood there, breathing heavy, half shaking, half laughing. Because even though my heart was pounding, even though I hated how much he dragged the kids into it, I knew this was only round 1. And I wasn't giving up my house. Not to him, not to any of them. Still, that night, I sat awake long after the lights went out, watching the window. Because deep down, I knew Henri wasn't done. Not by a long shot. After that driveway showdown, I thought the worst was over. It wasn't. Henri and my parents didn't just back off. They regrouped. By the next weekend, everyone in town suddenly had opinions about me. My old boss called to ask if everything was okay. "Heard you threw your brother and his kids out on the street," he said. "That true?" I swear my hands went cold. Apparently, my parents had been busy, telling their church group, extended family, old neighbors, hell, even my ex, that I'd turned cruel after buying the house. According to them, Henri had come to me for help, just until they could find a place, and I'd screamed at the children and threatened to call the cops. It was so perfectly on brand for them. They'd always rewritten reality to make themselves look noble, and me ungrateful. And now, they had an audience. I didn't defend myself. Not at first. I just kept my head down, went to work, came home, tried to keep my peace. But the texts kept coming. New numbers, block numbers, Facebook messages from people I barely knew. "How could you do that to family? Your brother's kids didn't deserve that." I started avoiding my phone altogether. Then one night, about 2 weeks later, I came home to find my trash cans tipped over, mail scattered all over the porch, and a giant black, selfish, spray painted across my garage door. I didn't need to guess who did it. The paint was fresh. The SUV tire tracks were the same ones I'd seen in my gravel. Henri wasn't subtle. I called the sheriff's non-emergency line, told them what happened. But when they asked if I had proof who did it, I just sighed. "Not yet," I said. After I hung up, I stood there for a long time, staring at that word, selfish. Big, sloppy, uneven letters that dripped down like they were melting. It felt like every insult they'd ever thrown at me, scrawled 6 feet tall, in red paint. And then something in me just hardened. I didn't scrub it off, not right away. I left it there for days, let it sit like a wound they couldn't stop looking at. The neighbors would pass by whispering. I didn't care. Let them think whatever. I wasn't playing defense anymore. The final straw came that Sunday. Mom called, voice sugary sweet. We've decided to forgive you, she said. I actually laughed. Forgive me? For what? For this ugliness. We know you're hurting, Aaron. You've always been fragile. Fragile, I said. You vandalized my garage. Oh, don't be dramatic, she said quickly, her tone sharpening. If you just let your brother use the house like a decent person, none of this would have happened. I hung up mid-sentence. That night, I drove to the hardware store, bought motion lights and a cheap security camera kit, and spent the whole evening installing them around the property. I didn't sleep much, just lay there, listening for engines, half expecting Henri to show up again. But when the first footage came through, the next morning, it wasn't Henri, it was Mom. Out there at 2 a.m. in her pink robe, standing in my driveway with a flashlight, like she was casing my house. She picked up one of the motion lights, looked straight into the lens, and whispered something I couldn't hear before walking back to her car. That was the moment it hit me. They weren't just trying to guilt me, they wanted control. And they'd burn every bridge, every boundary, and every lie to get it back. After catching my mom on camera sneaking around my driveway, something inside me finally snapped. Not in an angry, shouting way, no. It was quieter than that, cold, controlled. I spent 35 years being the family scapegoat, the one they humiliated, guilt-tripped, ignored, then blamed when I finally fought back. But this time, I wasn't playing their game. The next morning, I went to work like nothing happened, fixed a steel gate, replaced some pipes, laughed with the guys on the crew. I didn't tell anyone what was going on. But on my lunch break, I made a few calls. One to my lawyer friend, one to Child Protective Services, and one to the property manager of the complex Henri had been kicked out of. Turns out, Henri hadn't been evicted. He'd left voluntarily, after trashing the place and skipping 3 months' rent. He was also under investigation for neglecting to pay child support to his ex, Danielle. Yeah, the same Danielle who'd been messaging me, begging me to check in on the kids because Henri doesn't feed them unless Mom drops off groceries. So that night, I did something I hadn't done in years. I called her back. Danielle sounded tired, the kind of tired that lives in your bones. I don't want to get in the middle, she said, but Henri's using those kids as props, Aaron. He drags them around so your parents feel sorry for him. He's sleeping in the car half the time. Where are the kids now, I asked. With me, she said. They're fine. I just wish your folks would stop enabling him. That's when the idea started to form. My revenge wasn't going to be loud. It was going to be clean. 2 days later, I sent my parents and Henri an email, short, formal, and cold. I attached the footage of Mom trespassing, the screenshots of Henri's unpaid rent, and the information about the child support case. The subject line just said, boundaries. The message, this is my home. Step foot on my property again, and I'll file trespassing and harassment charges. You both used guilt to control me my entire life. I'm done. I won't speak to you again until you take accountability for your actions. If you want to help anyone, start with Henri's kids, not your pride. I didn't expect a reply, but of course, they didn't disappoint. Henri sent a single line. You're dead to us. Mom followed an hour later. You'll regret turning your back on family. God doesn't bless selfish men. I smiled at that one, because for the first time in decades, their words didn't land. But I didn't stop there. That weekend, I went to visit Danielle and the kids. I brought groceries, school supplies, and a box of small tools for Leo, because he told me once he liked fixing things like Uncle Aaron. When I got there, Emma ran up and hugged me. She smelled like crayons and shampoo, and it hit me how badly those kids needed stability. Not pity, stability. That night, I told Danielle she could use the camper behind my house if she ever needed space from Henri's chaos. I'd maintain it myself. She cried, tried to refuse, but I insisted. It's not charity, I said. It's a start. That was the first quiet victory, giving the people Henri used as weapons a place to breathe, a sanctuary. A week later, I heard through a mutual friend that my parents were furious. Apparently, they couldn't understand how the selfish failure, was helping their grandkids, while their golden boy was crashing on a buddy's couch. Henri showed up again a few days after that, alone this time, no kids. He stood by the fence, hat in his hands, looking like someone who'd just realized the world had moved on without him. I heard you helped Danielle, he said quietly. I didn't ask you to do that. I know, I said. He kicked out the dirt. They're mad at me, Mom and Dad. They should be, I said. So should you. He didn't answer. Just nodded slowly, eyes wet, before turning back toward his car. That was the first time Henri didn't look like the golden child. He looked like a man who'd finally met his reflection, and didn't like what he saw. A month passed after that talk at the fence. The air between us stayed cold, but different. Henri stopped sending threats or pity texts. Mom and Dad went unusually quiet, which in my family is never a good sign. Then one afternoon, Henri showed up again. No dramatics this time. He parked his car by the curb, didn't even step onto the property, until I waved him up. He looked like hell, hollow eyes, clothes that hadn't seen a washer in a week, guilt hanging on him like a wet coat. He cleared his throat. You still got that camper? I crossed my arms. Yeah, why? Danielle kicked me out, said she's done till I figure myself out. I just need somewhere to crash for a bit. I'll fix it up. You won't even know I'm here. For a long minute, I said nothing. The last time I'd let him close, he'd trashed my boundaries and nearly wrecked my sanity. But this wasn't the swaggering, golden boy from before. This was someone cracked open. You live by my rules, I finally said. You keep it clean. You pay for your own stuff, water, power, everything. You stay out of my house unless invited. You break that, you're gone. He nodded so fast it almost broke my heart. Yeah, I get it. I'll do whatever. We walked out to the camper together. It was small but functional, my old fallback, when times were rough. I'd cleaned it up weeks before, thinking maybe Danielle and the kids might need it. Life had other plans, I guess. Henry ran his hand along the counter, the metal glinting in the afternoon light. You really lived in this? He asked quietly. For 2 years, I said. It's not much, but it's honest. He smiled, small and tired. Guess I've got some learning to do. That night, for the first time since I bought the house, I didn't sleep alone on the property. The camper lights flickered softly through my window, tiny, warm, and strange. For a while, it worked. Henry kept to himself. He started picking up side jobs at a local auto shop. He paid for utilities on time. When his kids visited, I'd see him out back, teaching Leo how to patch a tire, or showing Emma how to roast marshmallows over the fire pit. It was weirdly peaceful. But of course, peace never lasts long in my family. When Mom found out Henry was living on my land, she lost it. First came the phone calls, her accusing me of trying to turn her son against his own family. Then came the guilt. You don't even talk to us anymore, Aaron. You think you're better than us now? Then she started showing up again. One night, around 10, I saw her car headlights sweep across the yard. She marched straight to the camper door, banging on it like the cops. I was already outside before she could start screaming. Mom, I barked. Wakas, what the hell are you doing here? She pointed past me toward Henri's door. I want to see my son. You're poisoning him against me. Go home, I said firmly. He doesn't need this. He's my child, she yelled, voice cracking into that high-pitched wail I'd known my whole life, the one that meant she'd lost control and was about to start tearing through anything in her path. Henri opened the door behind me, hair messy, face pale. Mom, stop, you're embarrassing yourself. That did it. Her hand flew before anyone could react. She slapped him, hard. The sound cracked through the quiet night. After everything we did for you, she hissed. You side with him? Henri didn't move, just stood there, cheek burning red, eyes wet. Get off my property, I said quietly. Now. She turned to me, eyes wild. You think you've won, don't you? You'll destroy this family. No, I said, stepping forward, voice low and shaking. I'm saving what's left of it. She backed away, furious and trembling, before storming to her car and tearing out of the driveway. Henri sat on the camper steps after she left, silent, rubbing the side of his face. She's never hit me before, he muttered. I handed him a beer and sat beside him. Yeah, I said, that's because you never told her no. He didn't say anything else that night, but for the first time in my life, I saw something break in Henri. Not just shame, but understanding. The golden boy was gone. Update. Hey everyone, didn't expect this story to blow up the way it did. I wasn't even planning on writing again, but after what happened last week, I need to get it out before I explode. First off, to everyone who said, don't let them back in your life. Yeah, you were right. I tried to be the better man, the bigger brother. I thought maybe helping Henri would somehow heal the wound between us. Spoiler. It didn't heal anything. It just exposed how deep the rot went. And before anyone asks, no, I'm not kicking Henri out. Not yet. He's actually trying. Weird sentence, right? Henri trying. He got a steady gig at the auto shop. He's been sober 3 weeks. He fixed the porch railing without being asked. And after Mom hit him, something shifted in him that I didn't think was possible. Humility. The night she slapped him, he barely said a word. The next morning, he showed up at my door with coffee, said, I get it now. What you meant about freedom, about peace. He didn't need to explain. I knew. But the fallout? Oh, it's been nuclear. 2 days after the incident, Mom and Dad showed up at my work. Yeah, my work. I was welding a gate when one of my coworkers ran over, pale-faced, saying there were 2 people outside asking for Aaron, their lost son. When I walked out, there they were. My parents, standing by the truck, pretending to cry. I almost laughed. Dad tried to pull that calm, reasonable tone he uses when he's about to twist the knife. We just want to talk, son. No, I said. You want control. You lost that. Mom actually fell to her knees, on the damn asphalt. Please, Aaron, you can't turn him against us. He's my baby. Henri's a grown man, I said. And if you keep showing up like this, I'll call the cops. That got their attention. The fake tears dried up quick. Dad's face went from sad to venom in 2 seconds flat. You think this ends with you playing hero? He said. We'll tell everyone what you've done. Go ahead, I told him. Tell them all. I've got the footage, the texts, the paint on my garage. Go scream your lies to the wind. It won't change a thing. They left in silence, but that night, someone keyed my truck. Deep, jagged lines across the door spelling traitor. Cops said there's nothing they could do without proof. I didn't even bother filing another report. But here's the twist no one saw coming. My grand revenge didn't come from vengeance, it came from peace. I posted those security camera clips on a private Facebook group my parents' church runs. The one where they'd been spreading lies about me. No captions, no rant. Just the video of mom sneaking around my yard at night, flashlight in hand, muttering, "He deserves it." Within a day, their social circle imploded. People they'd known for years started calling them hypocrites and abusive. Dad deleted his account. Mom deactivated hers. Henry came into the house the next morning holding his phone, eyes wide. "They're done," he said. "They're actually done." For the first time in my life, I felt something I never had with my family. Silence that meant peace, not punishment. And then something else happened. Henri started inviting his kids over again, but this time, not to parade them for pity. He brought them to see me. We spent last weekend fixing up the backyard, building a little fire pit, teaching Leo how to use a wrench, letting Emma paint rocks for garden markers. Danielle stopped by too. It felt normal. Like a family that wasn't built on guilt and manipulation, but on choice. And here's the crazy part. As soon as Henri packed the camper to take the kids back Sunday night, he paused at the door. "You know," he said, "I used to think you were just bitter. Now I think you were the only one awake." I didn't know what to say, so I just nodded. Because for once, Henri didn't sound like my brother, the rival. He sounded like my brother, the man. It's been 6 months since I last heard from my parents. No calls, no letters, no mysterious drive-bys in the night, just silence. The kind that used to terrify me, but now feels like sunlight after a storm. Henri still lives in the camper, only now it's not out of desperation. It's out of rebuilding. He's paying off debts, saving money, learning what showing up actually means. He's quieter now, softer. When he's not working at the auto shop, he's helping me fix up the house. He even surprised me by replacing the broken porch steps one weekend. "Figured it was time I built something that didn't fall apart," he said, wiping his hands on a rag. "The kids come by every other week. They've started calling the house Uncle Aaron's place, like it's some mythical safe zone in their world of chaos. Emma always brings her sketchbook. She's obsessed with drawing birds in my backyard. Leo drags his little red toolbox everywhere, determined to fix whatever he can get his hands on. It's weird how simple moments, paint on your hands, burnt marshmallows, laughter in the yard, can feel like redemption. Sometimes when the sun dips low and the sky turns that deep amber color, I catch myself staring at the camper light flickering through the trees. It reminds me of the first night I saw it glowing again, back when I thought letting Henri stay was a mistake. Now it feels like the proof that people can change if you stop rescuing them long enough to let them fall and figure out how to climb back up. Mom and Dad haven't apologized. They probably never will, but that's okay. I don't need an apology from people who never intended to give one. I finally understand that closure doesn't come from their words. It comes from my distance. I used to think revenge had to be loud, slamming doors, public humiliation, some big cinematic payback. But the sweetest revenge turned out to be quiet, peace, owning my house, laughing without looking over my shoulder. Watching Henri teach Leo how to check oil levels, knowing it's the first time the kid's seen his dad sober for more than a month. A few nights ago, Henri and I sat by the fire pit, just drinking beers in silence. He stared into the flames for a long time before saying, "You know, I used to think you hated me." "I did," I said honestly. "And I loved you too. That's the problem." He nodded. "Guess I get that now." We didn't need to say more. The wind shifted, carrying the smell of pine and ash. The kids were asleep in the camper. The stars were out, sharp and bright. I felt the weight of every year I'd spent begging for approval that never came, and how light it finally felt to stop asking. This house used to be proof that I'd escaped them. Now it's something better, proof that I survived them. And for the first time in my life, that's enough.